So let's take a look at 3 different approaches that we could implement here. It's a pretty good question. It's not too complicated, but I do like to show various approaches, as you know by now. So first, I'm going to do it the way that I instinctively would approach it before I had encountered Desmos. Let's start with the algebraic approach. So if I'm trying to get rid of a square root, I'm going to undo it by squaring both sides. That's the inverse operation. So I'm going to square both sides, and that results in me having w squared on the left side, and on the right side, the square and square root cancel, and I'm left with what we refer to as the radicand, which is 108w. Now, really, that 108w is 108 due to the first power, since there isn't an exponent explicitly written there. So by now, you've probably noticed I consistently come back to a particular analogy that in algebra, there's really 2 scenarios that you're going to see. You're going to have where there's one type of x, where I get x's to one side, numbers to the other, and then there's where you have more than one type of x. And in that case, where you have, let's say, x squared and to the first power, you actually want to get everything equal to 0, so that way you can factor and solve. And in this case, we definitely have 2 types of w, to the second and to the first. So let's go ahead and get everything equal to 0. And now we can factor and solve. I mentioned that there's 3 different approaches. The second approach is really at this step here, is we can go to our graphing calculator and choose the program quad solver. So when we go in here, notice it's saying that a is the coefficient of x squared, which in our case is going to be a 1. So we'll type that in. And then the b term, which is the coefficient of x, is going to be this negative 108. It's really important that you make sure you use this negative key down here and not the minus key. Otherwise, you'll get an error. And then the part that throws people off is now when they're asking for the constant, what that really means is the number that would have been after the w to the first term, but before the equal sign. And clearly there's nothing there. So we're going to go ahead and put a 0 as the constant value. And notice we get these 2 solutions, 108 and 0. So keep that in mind. Those are the 2 solutions that we got. And what they're really asking for is the sum of all the solutions. Well, sum means the result of adding the 2. And if you add 108 and 0, you're clearly going to get 108, and that's the answer. If, however, you prefer to continue algebraically, what you would do at this point is factor out the w that they have in common. And the reason we would do so is, notice if you go to page 33, which is side 1 of your math reference document, you'll notice that the very first image on the algebra page has these 6 different factoring scenarios that you'll really ever encounter. And the scenario that we have right now is where you have a binomial with x's, and it really could have been a trinomial, a polynomial with 4 terms, etc. But the idea is the greatest common factor scenario. So to take out the greatest common factor, we're going to take out the w to the first that they have in common. When we do so, we're left with a w to the first, because you subtract the exponents here, minus the w's cancel, so we get 108. And now we have what's called the zero product property. So the only way these 2 quantities can multiply to get 0 is if at least one of them is 0. So we set the first one equal to 0, or we could also have the second one equal to 0. And then here we can solve. And notice we get our 2 solutions again, 0 and 108. Now, and then of course, once we add them, we still get our answer is 108. Now the third approach is going to be using Desmos. So we'll go to Desmos in the upper right corner. If you had any previous graphs, you'd click the gear icon and choose delete all. I don't have anything there. And we're going to go ahead and type this in. Now keep in mind, we're going to want to use x instead of w because it's not some constant. And we're going to type in the square root. You could type in sqr and then t, and that's the shortcut key for making it a square root. However, if you prefer, you could go to the keyboard down here by clicking on it, choose the square root, type in 108x, and then our goal is to find the solutions. So the solutions are going to be the x values. So let's zoom out here. Oh, look at that. I can see it. So let me drag, zoom in again. Let's see where we're at. Got to keep zooming in. Oh, it's 108. And I could zoom way out to see if there's any other solutions. I actually, to be honest, don't know why x equals 0 is not also a solution, because if you plug it in, you get 0 equals 0, which works. But regardless, even if you just saw the 108, that would be the one solution, and you can't add it to anything else because that's the only answer, and you still get 108.